Hey, it's time for TV Skywriter. Good evening or good day, everybody. Welcome to TV Skywriter. I'm Pat Murray. I publish the Durham Skywriter, that's Durham, North Carolina's online community paper. And today we have a guest. Now, usually half of my guests are local and half are from elsewhere.
Wow.
And Wanda is here. She's in Durham. I should say, Dr. Dr. Wanda Boone is here from Together for Resilient Youth.
Mhm.
Welcome to the show, Wanda. I should say,
Thank you. It's good to be
Dr.
here
Boone.
with you.
Absolutely. We met years ago,
hmm
and I wanted, I sort of lost contact with you. So I'm going to be learning about what you're doing
hmm
along with everybody else. So I'm going to pretend like I don't know you.
Uh-oh.
And why don't you tell us what TRY is, Together for Resilient Youth?
Okay. So, first of all, hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you. Um, I have been in Durham since 1971. My husband, Earl, eloped me to Durham. That's how I got here. So many moons ago in 1971. Oh, and if you've seen the movie about Ann Atwater, that's when we moved to Durham. So anyway,
Okay.
so we lived in Durham for all that time, raised our children, and now we have grandchildren. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm not new to Durham, and I've been working in Durham for many years. So in 1971, I was the first African American to work outside of the kitchen at McPherson Hospital. I was in administration.
Hmm.
And I was the first African American to do research at Duke on babies that were born with metabolic disorders. Then
Hmm.
I was the first African American to work at a company which shall remain nameless in research, Triangle Park, as the senior executive director of quality assurance and regulatory affairs nationally. And when I almost said escaped, when,
Wow.
when I left that position in 2002, we formed a nonprofit that's called Together for Resilient Youth. So, and became a nonprofit in 2003.
Okay.
So the reason that we started the nonprofit is we don't have a horror story about our own children at all.
Thank
But
goodness.
yes, I know. But during the time that we were raising our children, we also had therapeutic foster children.
Hmm.
And with our therapeutic foster children over a span of 15 years, we saw that initially they presented with behavioral problems that we thought were not that serious, but that could be solved with love and um, a, a, a schedule and following up on their school and things like that.
Mhm.
So that was really successful. And then later on, our therapeutic foster children, who we always treated like our own children, although we did expect that one day they'd go back to their family. So it wasn't about holding on to them
Mhm.
forever, but to love them in the same way that we did our children.
That must be
But
hard
they
to do, though,
presented, well, it wasn't.
for them
It
to
wasn't
leave.
though. It really wasn't. So, but we saw that they were presenting with more substance use concerns and mental health challenges.
Mhm.
So we had to think about a new way of doing things. And I think that that was the reason that we started the nonprofit, because we recognized that there was some data out there that we needed to discover and
Mhm.
uncover, because it just seemed like this situation was going on and on and on, and there wasn't really the intervention
Mhm.
that we would have liked to have seen. So, Together for Resilient Youth is a coalition, meaning that different people come to the table, regardless of socioeconomic status. We're a very diverse group. There are millionaires in the coalition, and there are people of minimal means in the coalition, and everybody and everything in between. And we found that to be really be successful because you can have all of the voices at the table. Notice I said voices, voices at the table, and not just people sitting at the table, that are just going through the motions of doing somebody else's plan. So we all plan and work together in regards to whatever the topic is. So in our coalition, we have LIFT, which is our youth coalition for young people ages 9 to 17. We have our college coalition of young people, young adults who are 18 to 24. We have the Good Neighbor Business Network, which has grown in the past 3 years to 450 businesses. And the reason that we started that was because the first place that young people get alcohol is at home, but the second place is from a convenience store or gas station, whether someone who's 21 or older gets it for them, or they take it, or their ID is not checked. And because we're not the kind of group that wants to shut anybody down, we said, well, we're going to engage these businesses as good neighbors and say that we believe that you care as much about the health of the neighborhood as we do. They don't get paid.
That's quite an assumption.
I know, it's really been
It's not
wonderful.
always true, is it?
So when we started it, though, 60% of the stores sold to minors. And now we're at 12% of the stores selling to minors. So now, 12% is still too many, but that's the success that we had. You had a question.
Yeah, is your focus on alcohol and cigarettes? And those cigarillo things?
Yeah. Our focus is on everything. So we focus on tobacco, e-cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, K2, crank, blunt.
You said K2. K2?
K2 is synthetic marijuana. That's illegal in North Carolina. Okay, but we were on vacation in South Carolina and they sell it and it's not illegal. So, but anyway, we focus on use among minors. The opioid epidemic, of course, we've expanded that concern to young people and adults because it impacts everyone.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
I did have a question because I'm accustomed to people saying substance abuse.
Right.
And when I watch I'm very interested in the opioid crisis and drug addiction. I've always been interested in that. And I notice that the young people say, if I had only known not to ever take this thing the first time, it wouldn't have taken over my life the way it has. So I'm wondering, is that why you say substance use instead of abuse? Because abuse almost sounds as if you have permission to do it a little bit, but don't use too much. And it sounds like substance use is a smarter term, a more practical term.
Yeah, I think it's a smarter term and a more realistic term, but it's not one that I came up with because of the science and people that are in recovery and whomever else makes decisions about what the terminology should be. And that happens at the national level. They're the ones that changed it from substance abuse to substance use.
Okay. I think that's really, really smart. So how do you keep it all in line? I mean, you're dealing with so many different, like you said, the marijuana and the fake marijuana. I didn't even know there was such a thing, the cigarettes and the alcohol. Do you have to focus, do you go from, some organizations do go from crisis to crisis and they do alcohol this month and then we're running over here, we're doing marijuana. So do you do everything just equally at your own pace? Or
that's a really good question. And so in order to answer that, I'm going to just say a little bit about the other sectors that are involved, because I think that will kind of help this make a little bit more sense. So after the Good Neighbor Business Network, we have the faith community, law enforcement, community leaders. So there are 5 districts in Durham, and we have someone from each district represented on the coalition. Then we have the health community, schools, parents, and we also have parents that have lost children due to substance use or overdose. Okay, so if you think about all these people coming together in an effort to prevent substance use, then you can see how the different sectors interact. The bottom line is there's always going to be something new, because now the issue among youth is not so much cigarette tobacco use, but electronic
vaping,
cigarette use, right? But if we can get young people to have more respect and understanding of their brain and their body, then they would not take some of these dangerous, poisonous substances into their bodies, right?
Okay.
So the conversation that we have with young people doesn't start with don't do drugs. For us, the conversation starts with how do you make decisions? How are you feeling? What kinds of stresses do you have? How do you avoid peer pressure? How do you think about putting healthy foods in your body? So trying to establish that respect for your body, right? So if you eat McDonald's every day, no offense to McDonald's and fries and, juicy because they're greasy hamburgers, if you eat that every day, then you're not going to fare well physically and in regards to your health. If you don't wash your hands regularly, then, there are germs and you could get the flu, that kind of thing. So we start with those common sense things that talk about, my body is the only body I'll ever have, and I need to pay attention to what I'm putting in it. And so we go from that to commercials and music, Percocet, and anything else that's out there. And because we have youth, they inform us about what the different triggers are, what kinds of stresses that they're going through. And then those are the things that we as a coalition work together on in order to help ensure that prevention happens. So it wouldn't matter then whether it's alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, or the next new thing that comes along. If I care about my body and I understand that alcohol is a poison, even though it's so acceptable in our culture, then I'm not going to do that. So those are the kinds of things that we do in regards to that. The other important thing is that one of my favorite sayings is holding young people solely responsible for, we can say, underage drinking. But you can fill in the blank. It's like holding fish responsible for dying in a polluted stream.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You put a healthy fish in clean water, they're going to do fine. You put a healthy fish in polluted water, it's going to be sick and die. So adults are responsible for keeping the stream clean and creating an environment that is healthy enough for a child to grow and do well in.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I do have a question though, because when people very often do talk about youth and drug use and drinking and all this sort of thing, very often they're talking about the young people who have, like you said, stressors, and they're having a hard time in life. I know a lot of people with autism turn to substances and whatnot, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a bunch of kids out there, they're just having a good time, and they really don't seem to have any deep-seated problems. They just like to get drunk and get high. How can you possibly convince one of those kids to be more practical in what he or she is imbibing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I spoke to over 900 young people between the ages of 15 and 17 last year. Well, yeah, in this 1 year period, right? And so as a part of that mix, there's everybody. There are children whose parents allow them to drink. There are children whose parents don't allow them to drink. They're all in the mix of school together. Okay, so in addition to what you're saying, there's also peer pressure. So I don't say different things to different groups of people. And just like I just mentioned that alcohol is a poison, which it is, which is why if somebody drinks too much alcohol, they could die of alcohol. Yes, poisoning. And that's why alcohol should only be taken in certain doses, right? So the important thing is for young people to hear the message after those things I mentioned earlier about the media and all those things that can impact their decision making, is to talk about the dangers associated with alcohol, the dangers associated with marijuana, the dangers associated with tobacco. And I know that, many people believe that marijuana is safe, it's good, it's green, it's from the earth. And so, first of all, I'm talking about the adolescent brain that doesn't fully develop until someone is 25 years of age, which means that until that age, we need to protect children's developing brains. There's always going to be some young people, it's like Russian roulette. We can't determine and foresee necessarily which child is going to become addicted, which child is going to suffer alcoholism later on in life. Genetics plays a role. Metabolism plays a role. Habits that they grew up with play a role. So the idea is not to feel like I can stop any epidemic, but I certainly can, and all the people that work with TRI who are carrying these messages can help to influence the decision making of a child so that they don't fall into substance use addiction or anything else later on in life.
Okay. Now, what about the young people who say that they're really doing this because their home life is so bad? I mean, it's great to be able to tell them to respect their bodies and to not take in these substances. But for a young person who says that they really, really need help in getting through the day or in relaxing after an extremely stressful day, are you able to tell them, well, try yoga, or to tell them, to give them an alternative as opposed to just saying, don't do it at all?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole thing. In none of the discussions that we have with young people, and we train everyone on the coalition to be of the same mind. We talk about the dangers, but we don't say don't do it to a teenager, because many times teenagers want to take risks. That's part of the teenage psyche.
Oh, so you don't say don't. Oh, so you just point out the facts. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. And the facts have to do with the dangers. And we trust that as a teenager hears that message coming from someone who respects them as a growing person, that pre and post test show that they get the message that this is dangerous to do. But in regards to your very, very good and important question, I was one of those teenagers who, because my home life was so difficult, I wasn't thinking about alcohol calming me or being some kind of relief. But because it was there and available in my parents' home, then I did use alcohol as a 15-year-old. And that brings me to a really important point that we discussed. And, I won't spend much time on this because it probably will take a whole nother topic or program. And I talk to teenagers about this too, and to college students. I had a group of 10 college students just randomly selected and invited them to come and have a discussion about adverse childhood experiences and trauma. Because, we don't think of teenagers who don't necessarily have to pay bills, who don't have to worry about the mortgage, who don't have to worry about necessarily and on average where their next meal is going to come from. Although that's true for many young people. 1,000 homeless children in Durham public schools.
Wow.
Okay, so there's historical trauma that's experienced by African Americans who hold trauma in their DNA from slavery. There's trauma due to poverty. There's trauma due to hearing gunshots there at night. There's trauma because of bullying. I mean, those traumas exist, but there are 10 additional traumas that if someone experiences them before their 18th birthday, it can lead to all kinds of other challenges. And those are abuse, such as physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse before one's 18th birthday, in a total of 4 or more of these. Neglect, physical neglect, emotional neglect, household dysfunction, mental illness in the home, mother treated violently, divorce, substance use, or incarcerated relative. I know I'm going over that real quick, but if 4 or more of those happen before someone's 18th birthday, the outcomes of that can be lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, missed work, severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones.
Oh my God.
Okay. So, and so I read 10 things that if it happens before your 18th birthday, then those outcomes that I just read could be the case. Well, my score is 9. So my score is 9. So it's true that these things can have an impact on a child or a young adult's life. It did on mine. I attempted suicide twice when I was 14. I drank alcohol. I stopped drinking alcohol when I was 21, which is kind of the reverse of what happens. Haven't had a drink or anything like that since. But children need to know this. College students need to know this. Adults need to know this. Senior citizens need to know this. So if a child is suffering from these kinds of things, and I don't ask them to, raise their hand and say how many they have, but
of course.
Resilience is the key. And resilience doesn't mean that, you learn how to power through it. Resilience says that there are actions, behaviors, and thoughts that can be learned and developed in almost anyone that can help them ride that storm, even though the situation in their families may not change. The situation in my family didn't change, but I was able to be successful because I had other adults who cared about me. I had other coping mechanisms other than alcohol that allowed me to thrive and still be alive today.
Wow, that's wonderful. So the young people, especially the ones in your LIFT program, are they do they act as ambassadors to help their friends?
They do. They are. And they come from all walks of life. So we don't, I don't even want to use the word cream of the crop, because I believe that every single child has potential. And that when you take a child out of their environment and you expose them to something new, they can rise to the challenge. So we have children that are doing well in school, not doing well in school, have happy families, don't have happy families, but they learn not only to work together, but to be peer support, which, we'll talk about at the conference, peer support for other young people.
Now, Tony is asking about kids and teenagers dealing with sexual orientation issues. I suppose that could lead to substance use or drinking.
Oh yeah.
Um, So it could play a factor as well. I don't think it was one of those factors that you mentioned, but
no, and neither was trauma, historical trauma, or gunshots heard, or all those things. So there can actually just be one traumatic experience that stops one in their tracks and doesn't allow them to experience a joyful life fully, shall we say. So we have young people who are part of Lift and College Try, who are LGBTQ plus, and everybody works together. Now, the suicide rates for LGBTQ young people is higher than African Americans or white children, because they're dealing with, some other stressors such as bullying, not being accepted by, sometimes by their own families. And so we realize that that's an issue. But again, if you have a supportive network, and the key to resilience literally is having at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about you that you can go to, who is a safe place, a healthy place, then that can make the difference between life and death.
Awesome. I guess that, in my opinion, that's probably why the Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs, probably why they are in some cities doing quite well.
Right. Yeah. So making sure that a child is not isolated for any reason. I just read today about a high school. It's not in Durham. Hopefully this will happen in Durham, but they are opening up school every Friday night so that young people have some place to go and some things to do in an organized fashion. So
they said that when I was a kid. I mean, I know they have after school programs, and it seems that they're kind of formal nowadays. But when I was a kid, you could sign up your kid, and they would stay at the school till 6:30.
Yeah.
And then they could either come home or you could pick them up. And it wasn't as formal as it is now, where they have, specific programs, but you could just kind of hang out.
Yeah. I think
play basketball,
and,
do your homework, just kind of chill.
I think young people need that. They really do. They and plus it's a matter of socialization too, because I asked the question in some of these groups of the 900, how many of you have friends that are of a different race or, that live in a different part of town? And they really don't. So I think that, that's a problem too. Sometimes we have to force those kinds of interactions if they don't happen naturally.
Right. So, of course, the schools would say, well, who's going to stay late and watch all those kids? We're anxious to get home to our families as well. So.
There are so many people that are willing to volunteer. We don't take advantage of the help that's out there in Durham. I mentioned there were 1,000 homeless children in Durham public schools. And because of our network that you've heard about, there was not one family that went unsheltered last year in Durham public schools.
Yeah.
Not one.
Wow.
Not one. You may not ever hear about us on the news, but that doesn't matter because we're still doing the work.
That's important work. Yeah. That's really important work. And I did want to mention, at least for Durham, there is the LGBTQ Center here in Durham, and they do have programming for young people. And I think they have monthly meetings. So check the Durham Skywriter, it's in there.
Yeah.
But you can just go to the LGBTQ Center of Durham. And not only do they have monthly meetings for the young people, which they lead themselves,
right.
At the same time, they have meetings for their parents or other people who want to understand more on how they can help.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think that's really wonderful
It
as well.
is. It is.
Mhm. So I know. So we're about 40 minutes in, and I know you wanted to talk about
Oh,
two
that much already?
events
Yeah.
happening this Friday and this
Yes,
Saturday.
I
And
do.
I want to give the dates because this show might be watched in the future. So April 12th and 13th,
Yes, yes.
2019. So
Mm,
what's happening?
yeah. Thank you so much. I didn't realize that time has flown like this, but every year, Together for Resilient Youth has an annual conference. And so we are having an annual conference again. We always recognize a citizen who receives our Prevention Eagle Award for their work in um, prevention, supporting prevention, talking about prevention. And this year it's Mr. Harold Chestnut. Who,
Yay.
do you know? Yes, I know. I'm
Yeah,
really excited.
District 4
District
pack
4,
leader.
yes. So I'm really excited about that. That's going to be
Awesome.
one of the highlights. So Friday night we'll kick off at 6:30 with dinner. There will be presentations by our young people, our college age students, kind of an overview of the things that we've been doing. Two speakers. We're going to be out of there by 8, though. I know it sounds like a lot, but we're going to be rolling and moving. Two guest speakers. One is Jim Van Hecky, who has been involved in prevention recovery for many years, and he's very inspirational. And then we're going to have reflections from a young lady who's sadly, who has lost her mother, father, a brother, a sister due to substance use. And now she's working in the prevention field. And she's going to just talk about what other things are needed in terms of supporting families that are going through this. So that's Friday night. Then Saturday, we're having a special training session that is kind of new to what's going on in terms of recovery. So many people have heard about peer support specialists. And these are individuals who support people who are in recovery, and they do that as a peer support because they have experienced substance use in the past and they are in recovery. So what we're introducing is something that's called Community Substance Use Network. And these are individuals just like you and me, for ages 15 to 17, 18 to 25, the regular adult population, and then for parents that have lost children due to substance use. These individuals will be separated out into those 4 groups. And folks are coming from Substance Use Mental Health Services Administration, which is a national organization. And the program is called, I have to look at my notes because it's called Brass Tacks, but it stands for Bringing Recovery Supports to Scale Technical Assistance Center Strategy. Wow. Anyway, so they're experts that are going to help each of those groups understand what they can do in order to support people who are just coming out of the emergency department or who are neighbors. And it doesn't mean that you have to take a whole lot of time with this. It could just be providing information, telling people where to go for some other support.
Now, who's invited to come to these events? Again, this is Friday and Saturday morning and Friday evening, right?
Yes, yes. It's open to everybody, and there's scholarships that are still available. But if you would like to support us with a gift, you can give $64, which is the coalition member amount, or $109, which is the general population amount. However, scholarships are available, and we've been handing them out right and left.
Of course, because you're Wanda Boone.
I know.
So where is this going to be held? Here, and I know it's going to be in Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah,
so.
I'm sorry. It's going to be at the Millennium Hotel, which is at 2800 Campus Walk in Durham. And what else do you need to know? Oh, and so the link, I guess what I can do, well, the link is, how do I say this link? Or can we get it to everybody?
Can they just go to durhamtry.org?
Yes, they can go to durhamtry.org and click on the calendar, and the information is there.
Okay. So what do you envision for the future for your organization? Because when I first met you, it was Durham Try. Your focus was on the whole city. And you were telling me you're in different cities now.
Yes, we've been invited to start coalitions in other cities. And I've been doing a lot of training on adverse childhood experiences and resilience and helping people work through and walk through that process. So we are in Yadkin County, Johnston County, Henderson, Vance, Granville, those 5 counties, Craven County, Hoke County, and Robeson.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, when I first met you, it was just you and Earl.
Oh my goodness.
Are you going from county to county? Just the two of you?
Oh no. That's why we have all these amazing people. And we have 6 staff.
You got staff now, okay.
And each of the people that, each of the sectors that I talked about, you know, they're doing things as well. So Earl and I, or I may be the face of Tribe, but certainly everybody who is doing this great work gets kudos.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that you're expanding and doing so well. I mean, every now and then you're in the news for having gotten a grant or awarded for this, and you're just doing so much. I'm so proud of the work you're doing, and I do hope that you're able to continue this work because it's so important.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And be sure to invite yourself back because you wanted to talk about resilience as a separate show.
Yes, I do. I think it's really important. There's so much trauma in our society. You know, you just really wouldn't believe it. And we all need to help each other recover and help each other know that we can live our best lives possible.
Awesome. So if you could stay for another minute, what I'm going to do is to officially end the show. Okay. But Tony and Stephen are still here. And I think Tony might have a couple of questions, which would probably be better taken off the air.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is to, so don't go anywhere, Wanda. Dr. Boone. So
you can call me Wanda, please.
I know, I've been calling you Wanda for years. Okay. So everybody, I appreciate your watching TV Skywriter, and be sure to read Durham, North Carolina's online community paper, the Durham Skywriter, at durhamskywriter.com. If you would like to be on the show, just write to me. Find me on Twitter, Durham Skywriter. You don't have to be in or from Durham. I've talked to people in Kenya and Brazil and all these different places. So just contact me. Love to have you on. And I will say ciao for now. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. See you folks.